Today we're going to cover Rohini
No,
Nakshatra.
you got to do that again. See, you always go into a serious mode. Just be your happy usual self. Today,
Today,
I
I
always
don't.
notice
Okay,
you go into like the serious doctor mode, like you have cancer and you have like one day to live, like 1 week to live.
okay. Today we're going to cover Rohini Nakshatra and all the planets in Rohini
Joe,
and
Jay, that could be Joe. I could be Joe today if you want.
no, I was going to say and
Yeah.
Joy because you're trying to bring joy to me right now. So I was going to call you Joy. And Jay
Oh,
is with me today. Hi, Jay.
hello. Yeah, I'm trying to bring joy, but I could also be joy. I could be whatever you want me to be.
Because you were telling me not to be so serious with the intro. So
Well, it's funny because normally, like
yeah,
once you're just relax, like you're totally chill, but then it's like these intro, all of a sudden it's like, you're going to the doctor's office and you're getting bad news.
little robot sound.
Yeah,
Hi, today
yeah.
we're doing Rohini Nakshatra.
Mm.
Yeah, so here we are. Rohini,
Okay.
Rohini.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this one for a week or two now. I don't remember when we were supposed to
Yes,
do it.
Saturn and Mars got the better of us.
Yeah, that's true. Kind of
Yeah.
like, what is it, right? It's the in the nakshatra, how many nakshatra, like which number is it? Like where do we start?
So it's the fourth nakshatra, and the Vimshottari planet is Chandra. Rohini happens to be the favorite
Wife.
wife of Chandra or Soma, the moon. And all of the nakshatras are his wives, and Rohini happens to be the favorite. Astronomically, there's a reason for that, is because the moon actually spends the most amount of time transiting through Rohini. So you can see how the narrative has been constructed around the physical movement of planets, in this case, the moon. But it's considered the favorite wife of Chandra. As we'll see, in the Rohini Nakshatra is a very fertile nakshatra, and it's one of the nakshatras that has a lot of needs. It needs to be nurtured in order to create, cultivate, and grow. And when we look at how it's sandwiched between Kritika Nakshatra and Mrigashira Nakshatra, Kritika's deity is Agni, which is fire, is giving the heat and it's giving the light to Rohini. And on the other side, Mrigashira is the deity is actually Soma, Chandra, the moon, and it's giving it the moisture and the coolness that it needs. So this fertile field of interaction we call Rohini in the middle of them gets the exact right environment that it needs. It has its needs met to be able to become one of the most fertile nakshatras. And in the Mahabharata, Rohini is the sister of Agni and Soma. They are the brothers to Rohini. So these nakshatras have a deep relationship in the tradition too. Rohini is a very fertile nakshatra and its deity is Prajapati. And Prajapati is also synonymously related to Brahma, the creator, the ultimate creator, and Prajapati is the lord of all creatures. So we can see that when we're talking about from an existential sense, that which exists in its manifest form, the potentiality that has become a possibility and now it's actualized and expressed as a form of a creation in the entirety of the known universe, cosmos existence, is Brahma's creation. He's the creator god. Brahma's quality in himself is Rajas, which is it's about activity, action. It's an agitated kind of state. It's about passion. So it's a creator god. So we can see that he's engaged in constant activity. And then the triplicity guna of this nakshatra is also Rajas, Tamas, Rajas. This is very important for cultivating or creating anything because you need a state of activity and then you need to cultivate what you have created, give it some time to grow, and then the growth itself that comes out of it is another Rajas activated quality. So these are all the things that are related to this nakshatra. And I guess just to outline it, I guess I'm outlining it here at the beginning. The symbol for Rohini Nakshatra is an ox cart, like a cart, a vessel of movement that moves what has been created from one location to another location. We can kind of discuss that and explore what that meaning is. And this is a very enduring nakshatra. And for any creation to come to its fruition, it needs to have this enduring aspect to it. It needs to be stable and fixed. And this nakshatra also has this quality. So these are the things we can talk about as the basis of what this nakshatra is about. And then we can discuss all the planets in Rohini Nakshatra and how they play themselves out.
Okay, you were saying that Rohini needs the favorite wife, but it can be explained astrologically.
Astronomically.
Astronomically, sorry.
Yeah.
So how is that?
So, okay, so if you look at the pattern of the moon doesn't have a linear movement, right? So it goes from south to north and it has this kind of like a snake wavy motion. That's why even throughout a night, when you look at the moon, it's not like rising and setting. It's going through this kind of motion in the sky. It has kind of an erratic movement to it. The amount of time that it takes for the moon to go through its arc and to go through its movement, it takes the longest. So the moon spends the most amount of time in Rohini. And in the narratives of Soma and having his favorite wife as Rohini, he spends the most amount of time with Rohini. And when you look at it astronomically from a physical manifestation and expression of it, it literally is spending most amount of time in that constellation. And then the opposing nakshatra to Rohini is Jyeshta, right? So Jyeshta is the most jealous towards Rohini, and it actually spends the least amount of time there. So these nakshatras have their narrative, but these narratives are also connected to the astronomical movements of the moon through these constellations too.
Okay, and so but then that's astronomical
Yeah.
explanation.
Yes.
But from an astrology explanation, what is the narrative behind that?
That Soma, his favorite wife is Rohini.
But is there a reason or?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what Rohini does and what Rohini needs, Rohini would naturally need Soma the most. Because think about Rohini is very much related to concept of, let's say, agriculture, right? What's one of the primary things that you need in agriculture? Other than light, I was saying Agni, Kritika is given it the light from that nakshatra. Soma itself will give Rohini the water because the moon, its primary element is water. So Rohini has this immense need for Soma because it's giving it the water, the nurturance that itself needs in order to be fertile, in order to create. So imagine the dynamic between a husband and a wife, for example. I would imagine, I'm not a man, but I would imagine as a man, you would feel very loved if you felt like your wife really needed you and appreciated what you're providing her. Because even as a woman, you kind of want that you want to feel needed. You want to feel like the aspects of myself that I bring to him is very much loved and appreciated. So they have, even when we look at it in terms of what Rohini represents as this fertile land and what it needs, it's water, that moisture, that to have that kind of lushness that's in Rohini. Soma is the perfect placement. And then you can see why Soma would love Rohini so much. We could say that she appreciates Soma a great deal. They love each other in that sense.
And they need each other?
We have to realize that when we talk about Soma, when we go to the next nakshatra, Mrigashira, that's the actual deity of the next nakshatra. But in the Rohini nakshatra is the Vimshottari planet that awakens the nakshatra. Its actual deity is Brahma. But yeah, Soma, and when we talk about planets, we'll see that moon is one of the planets that does best in Rohini nakshatra. And it has to do with that water element and the nurturing aspect of it, because the nakshatra of Rohini is creating stuff, it's cultivating stuff. And even if we take the concept of any creator, let's say a painter cannot paint without getting nurtured with paintbrush and paints. Otherwise, they can't paint. So Rohini is getting what it needs to be able to have that fertile way of cultivating and creating, and Soma, the moon, is giving it that. Their synergy is almost perfect, Soma and Rohini together. Yeah.
So what's the relation to the ox
The
and the
relationship,
cart?
yeah, it's not just the ox, it's the cart. We're talking about a vessel that's grounded. Rohini is talking about, like, when we take Brahma into consideration as the creator god, he's creating every facet of existence. So the ox cart becomes the carrier of life, the carrier of those creations. It becomes a medium where, for example, even the seeds could be taken to another part to be sown, and then they can give rise to another form. So that transportation is a form of progression symbolically in terms of what this creation and creative process is. It's symbolizing the support that a creation needs to go from, for example, from conception to reality. So it's a support system from potentiality to actual creation. So it's also expressing that distance that exists between that first, like the creative process. Oh, I have an idea, the transportation of it that needs to occur to become something actualized and to be delivered, the deliverance of it. So when we look at the ox cart, it's representing these kind of things, and it's permitting the fertility to be a continuous process, which is also another essence that's in Rohini. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's like you said, the transportation of it, like the trans or whatever, bringing it from that to this. Like you need
Yes.
that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the creative process is that, like you literally have an idea at the beginning. So the seed emerges, but you have to transport the seed now to some medium, and then you work on it on the medium, and then it's actualized. Now your creation needs to be transported, let's say, to the consumer, to be very literal. So the ox cart is allowing these transitional stages that are required for a creative process to occur. So it's a vessel of allowing the movement from one stage to another, for example. And we have to remember that Rohini in the traditional text is very much related to agriculture. Even the class category or classification attached to Rohini are the Shudras, or they're farmers, they're working the land in order for what has been created in terms of crops. Now it needs to be transported into the market. You get the money, therefore you can start to create new crops again. So we have to remember that agricultural context related to Rohini also.
Okay. So it has a lot to do with, is it just crops or is it creating anything?
It's creating anything, but agriculture is a huge part of it. And we have to make a distinction here between Prajapati and Brahma, for example. The deity of this nakshatra is actually Prajapati. Prajapati is a form of Brahma, but Prajapati is strictly the lord of creatures, is the lord of, for example, everything we see on earth, human, animal, crops, for example. But Brahma is the creator of the universes, the cosmos, the galaxies, and this. So we're kind of bringing it closer, more near and dear to us when we're talking about Rohini in terms of agriculture, because it's been such an important facet of human existence.
Well, yeah, you need agriculture obviously to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were hunters and gatherers before, but even if you're gathering, you're still gathering from the crops, and you would still need some sort of a vehicle, even if the human and their pouch was the cart. We're still seeing that notion of transportation for nourishment and regeneration, which allows creation to happen.
Okay, then somebody with planets in the sign, are they very nurturing then?
Depends what kind of planets end up here, right? But this
Yeah.
nakshatra in itself has a lot to do with nurturance, creation, cultivation, fertility. The benefic planets support this a lot, and the malefics very much hinder this process. Yeah.
Okay. And the degrees you were gonna, I don't know if you already
Yes.
went over them.
Okay, so as usual, I want us to keep in mind that when we're looking at the nakshatras, we have to take into consideration the sidereal degrees. And if you're looking at the tropical zodiac, you have to convert the degrees of the sidereal to the tropical, which is about 23 degrees apart. When we look at the sidereal degrees, Rohini Nakshatra falls into 10 degrees to 23 degrees and 20 minutes of Taurus. And when we do the conversion to tropical, you have to look at 5 degrees and 36 minutes to 18 degrees and 56 minutes of Gemini. So that is something that we have to take into consideration. Please do the conversions. Otherwise, you're looking at a completely different nakshatra. If you're looking at the tropical zodiac and you're just taking the tropical degrees, because we're talking about the constellations and the stars and not the equinox and the solstice, the movement of the sun, which is the tropical zodiac.
Okay, well, what are some characteristics of somebody with this? I guess it depends on the planet that's placed there.
Yeah. One of the
Okay, so
characteristics that you will find in Rohini natives, for example, they are seeking for love, the need for love, because it's a type of nurturance to be loved. Translation of Rohini is the red one. And the color red, we can attach it to passion and to desire. So in a sense, they feel their own sense of creativity and fertility in terms of establishing connection with someone who can nourish them. This nakshatra is very apt at nourishing people, but itself needs nourishment also. This nakshatra, like in Taittiriya Brahmana, is the actual verse goes, the procreator's arousal needs moisture for plants. So this nakshatra wants to be aroused, wants to be fertile, wants to be able to create, but it actually needs moisture and water from some other source. This is one of the reasons why this nakshatra and its natives they can become dependent on other people loving them, and it's essentially looking for a kind of a nourishment to get the sense of arousal to be able to create. So this is something that's very dominant in this nakshatra. And with maturity, I feel that these natives, despite what kind of planets in that nakshatra, they will learn how to also utilize what they do have, because this nakshatra can create a sense of neediness sometimes, that I just need more in order to be able to do that. I need more support. I need more love. And not understanding that you also have to nurture, you also have to love, and sometimes you just have to make do with what you have. And that in itself creates an attractive environment where you could perhaps get more resources. So this is something that's prominent in this nakshatra with its natives. You can get people who are very love hungry.
okay, so they thrive on being nurtured, but they kind of forget to nurture the other.
It could, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think with lack of maturity, people tend to think that way. You hear a lot of people, right? They're like, when they talk about they want to be in a relationship, they always say, I just really want to be loved. It's like, what about the other half of that sentence, which is in order to be loved, you also have to love.
Yeah.
But when you have that one track mindedness about what you need, you can't really attract love either. You're going after all the wrong people and you might be with a bunch of wrong people. So yeah, you have to understand this reciprocal relationship, because you're actually cultivating another person in order so that they can support you and give you the moisture and the love that you need to do what you want to do also.
Yeah, so it's almost a one-sided, like the partner's just going to feel neglected at some point.
Yeah, this could happen. Yeah. And this nakshatra has tremendous amounts of needs, because, I mean, think about it. During dry season, like summertime and August, when the grass and the trees are not getting any more moisture, they all start withering and dying. And I think this is one of the reasons why that agricultural or the plant life is so prominent as a theme in this nakshatra because it's also demonstrating the tremendous amount of need that's in this nakshatra in order to be functional. It needs the support of other people in order for itself to support and to become the source that can nurture and cultivate.
And then obviously it's going to depend whatever planet is sitting there is going to change the dynamic of that.
Yeah.
So the favorite moon, that would do very well. Obviously, that person is going to be very nurtured and nurturing and
yes. The moon is receptive. The moon's element is water. The moon is all about care. It's a very reciprocal planet. For example, moon in astrology doesn't have any enemies. The moon doesn't consider anyone its enemy because it has this capacity to be reciprocal to every planet, even when they're malefic. It's the other malefic planets that have a problem with, or other planets that have a problem with the moon. The moon technically doesn't have a problem with anyone. So it's reciprocal, it's nurturing, it's caring, it's loving, it's about mothering. And then when we come to a nakshatra, a field of interaction that is talking about, hey, I want you to create something, you have to nurture, you have to care, you have to want to show up and water something every day in order to get the actualization and the fruit of your labor. So when the moon comes here, it gets that patience. Even though the moon fluctuates so much, the nakshatra gets its enduring quality for nurturance and for care. So what it does and who it's connected with, it can give fruition to it. And when you have the moon here, for example, because of this reciprocal relationship that's happening, that the native's getting nurtured, and now the native knows how to nurture its environment also so that it feeds it and it creates this loop, the cycle of give and take that's very nurturing. Everything in Rohini Nakshatra becomes very enduring and stable. The relationships become long-term. It creates a lot of stability in this nakshatra and enduring qualities. So the moon does excellent here. Yeah, the moon creates that reciprocal dynamic. So I'm saying that Rohini natives in general could have this feeling of, I need to be loved and I need to attract to myself in order to have that sense of fullness so that now I can give to something else and to cultivate it. The moon gives it this, so it has enough fullness, so now itself can reciprocate back. Like what we'll see with the sun, for example, the other luminary. So if you have sun in Rohini, what could happen is that the native will give too much to the wrong person. The person will not reciprocate back to them. And then this loop will become dried out. And the native will at some point figure out, like, I can't love this person, for example. It's actually drawing me out to love this person. So that reciprocity gets dissipated and it goes away. So that's going to break a relationship. But when you have the moon here, because that cycle is just continuous, Rohini is getting its moisture and its needs met because its needs are met, is meeting the needs of the lover, and it just keeps going and going. And sun is a mild malefic, so it's not even that bad. But even comparing the luminaries and how they're affecting Rohini, these kinds of things can come into play.
Okay. But like I obviously, depending on the chart, you're gonna have to look at what house this is placed in to really see.
Yeah.
But besides like a romantic relationship, how else would a moon play out here?
So creatives, think about people who have to take care of other people. This could even indicate someone who's a nurse. So you're caring for other people, right? Parents, they're growing people, they're that fertility aspect of even having a child comes to be related to Rohini. Cultivating the child, growing the child, creating it. So children become a very prominent theme when you have malefics or sun. The mild malefic, it starts to play around with these signification in a that brings hardship to it. But when you have moon or Venus and Jupiter here, it adds and augments to this. If you think about creative people in general, they have to have ideas and they have to conceptualize those ideas and they have to be in the creative process. So again, it's talking about the entire symbolic tree that's in Rohini Nakshatra. So it can manifest itself in that sense of creatives, parents, people in occupations where they have to care for other people. So yeah, it's indicated, and it's talking about also our intimate relational dynamics, because I was saying this nakshatra and its natives, they have this affinity or this sense of immense need for love. And usually that could be love for children, your children, but children usually don't reciprocate back to us. Their job in this world, at least for the first half of their life, is to take from us. So someone better have very good enduring qualities before they can see that reciprocity. That's why I'm saying that it's going to be coming to mostly relate to one's partner in a relationship dynamic.
Okay. And having the moon there, I guess it depends on the house again. Could it show like what a person kind of looks like?
The moon represents your body in general, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, when you have the moon, any sign or in any house or conjunct other, but yeah, it's going to come to have a manifestation as a physical form because that's what the moon represents, the mind and the body. So it's saying something about the configuration of both of those domains. But if you have it in the first house, for example,
Hmm.
more so than the ninth house, more so than the fifth house, because that's what the first house represents. It's your
Okay.
physical body.
So if it is in the first house, just to throw it out there, what would someone look like?
There's going to be attractiveness in the Rohini Nakshatra in general, because
I'm
we're
guessing,
talking,
sorry, softer features, right?
it could be softer feature. We're talking about feminine features. We're talking about, we can call it softer feature, but most importantly, we're talking about beauty in terms of health, because that which is unhealthy is unfertile, right?
Hmm.
Even the plants that you have at home, the one that's been not watered or overwatered
Yeah.
and it's dying, it's unhealthy and it's an unattractive plant in that state. I'm not saying when you're fertile, you're attractive, but that sense of fertility and attractiveness is something very prominent in the Rohini Nakshatra. When we listen to some of the scientists nowadays, they talk about the female body and fertility being synonymous with certain kinds of shape.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's even when you're going, even when, let's say as a girl, you become a woman and your menstruation starts, your body starts to fill out a little bit. When you want to imagine Rohini in terms of how it looks, it has this fertile, healthy, reddish. When you blush, Rohini is also
Yeah.
called the blushing bride.
Okay.
It's there's a kind of a warmth to it. So yeah, we can take all of these symbolisms that are related to Rohini and start to imagine what a Rohini native might look like. And the explanations that I'm giving right now are very feminine. There are men who are born with Rohini Nakshatra too, and obviously they're not going to have a fuller hips and like breasts, but it's still saying something about that health that comes to be synonymous with their attractiveness. And they are a nakshatra very apt at creating arousal in other people. This nakshatra has a lot to do with arousal, but it's arousal in terms of, it's not the kind of arousal we were talking about, for example, in Ashlesha nakshatra, which has to do with like this desirous aspect of luring in. The arousal and the attractiveness here is because of that sense of fertility that's here, that sense of health and abundance that's here. We're attracted to things that feel abundant and full and
Because
lush.
like through evolution, is that not the whole thing? Like you're attracted to like women's like if they have bigger hips, they're psychologically more fertile, right?
Yeah, but you know what? That's why I said when I was making that statement, I said according to some scientists, because I don't know, man. When I hear discussions like that,
Hmm.
I know that there's a weird slant and a perspective to that too, because even when I look around, I know a lot of people who don't have those kinds of proportional curves, or they're very slim and they are still in a relationship. They still had children. Men were still attracted to them. They were attracted to other people. So
No,
and that's why
obviously, but
I don't want to ride that boat too hard. If we just take it at its face value, that that's how they describe it, it's kind of associating to this nakshatra feel, you
okay.
know? Yeah. Attaching fertility to hip ratio and breast size and whatever. Just because this nakshatra is fertile, we're just using it as an example.
Yeah, no, I was just curious because I'm sure I know a lot of people like I used to look at that like Vishaga. What do I look like? What are my features?
Yeah.
Um, what am I supposed to look like? Or, you know?
If I'm not mistaken, for example, Amy Schumer is a Rohini native. I am a Rohini native.
Oh,
Yes.
but you do have that allure.
Um,
You are feminine though, right? Like you're not like me. I come off like a dude.
you don't come off as a dude.
No, I don't mean I look like a dude, but my mannerisms are very guyish. I'm not very feminine, right?
But you know what, the beyond like appearance wise, the way Rohini is manifesting itself in my life, and it's very obvious, is for example, very much involved in the creative process. Thumbs up. As a writer, I draw, I paint. I spent my entire days of my life for decades now in this, and I feel that I am most alive. I have a sense of purpose when I am engaged in this process. So it's yeah, it's not always about someone's looks, or it's not always about someone's partner. It's that's what I'm saying. You could even
Okay, so creative is the big key word here.
creative, could be fertility too, in terms of having children. That's a huge theme in Rohini
So
Nakshatra.
people they want to have a family.
Especially when you have benefics there, it can incline someone to that a lot more. Yes.
Okay, so male or female, like even as the
Yes.
male, that's somebody who
Yes.
wants a partner who's going to give him children.
Yeah, and to be loved. This is one of those
Yeah.
nakshatras will say something like, look, I want to have children with someone that I truly love, and they just love me to death, and that child is the expression of our love.
Oh,
It's
okay,
our
okay.
creation. Some people
Oh,
don't do that. Some people are just, it's
yeah,
very
yeah,
practical. Like, you know what? The biological clock for both of us is like, we need to have children.
yeah.
But this nakshatra will, and this nakshatra can suffer because of that too. You will also find natives in this nakshatra who will not have children because they didn't find the right person. They didn't feel like they could have that reciprocal thing and that nurturance to be able to grow something and to cultivate that relationship to a point where there could be fruition of their love, which is the child. So it can create some sorts of torment here too for some people, if that's how they think and that's how they think having a child should be like. It's kind of got a romantic notion to it in some ways, because a lot of people just have kids for practical reasons. It's just time. No better
Yeah.
time than right now. Let's just do it. It's like a Nike commercial. Let's just do it.
Yeah, and a lot of people have children, but they're actually not really attached to them.
Look, this is another thing we have to consider, because this nakshatra has needs. So it's
Hmm.
somehow it's got to get its water to remain a fertile nakshatra. You can also get parents here who feel super burnt out and drained, like a single parent, because they're just constantly giving, giving, providing, but who's filling their cup? And then this is a soft feminine. I mean, it is an enduring nakshatra. It can endure the process of creativity and that cultivation, but it's not good at just enduring someone taking. They become drained and dry and they lose that sense of fertility. And then when that happens, they feel like they're losing themselves and their purpose for life and what it means to exist. This is how far this nakshatra can go and feel. So Yeah, when they get stuck in these parental dynamics where they just become the primary caregivers and no one's taking care of them, they can burn out. This nakshatra can actually burn out if it's not received because it needs resources and able to do the beautiful thing that it does, which is to create and to cultivate and to nurture and to grow.
So it like in other like even a painter, like you said earlier, they
Yeah.
don't have the resources, they get frustrated and they can't.
They can't paint.
Yeah, yeah.
Imagine a painter who can't afford to have paint brushes, paint, and a canvas, and you feel that's the purpose of your life. At the least, someone needs to provide them with those means for them to be able to create the beautiful things that they create that decorates other people's houses and brings them joy and a sense of fullness into their life. So yeah, this nakshatra is very much about that.
Yeah, like I have a friend, but just the way you said, sometimes if they don't have the resources, it could even be energy, right? So,
Yeah.
she was that type of person. She was a single mom. She had kids. I guess for her kids, she wanted everybody to come to, like, she felt more comfortable inviting people to always to her house, right?
Right.
So it would be like all these other parents, all these other kids. For the other parents, it was great. It was like daycare. You drop your kid off. But I think she got to a point, like her main reason for doing it is that she likes to entertain and stuff, but she also wanted her kids to just be home rather than going to other places. She just felt safer that way.
Yeah.
But I think it gets to a point where I was saying, like, maybe I said to her, I said, maybe you can, because eventually she just kind of backed off. She's like, nobody ever reciprocates. Nobody ever invites me over or says, hey, I'll pick up your children. Or, she was the one who was doing all the driving. She would always volunteer. She liked doing it. It's not like she didn't.
Mhm.
But I think it got to a point where she got so, it's almost like the life was sucked out of her
Yeah.
for doing it for so many years where she was the only one and everybody just came to expect that, oh, well, she'll watch our kids or she'll pick our kids up or she'll take our kids with her, that eventually she became completely the opposite, where she just kept saying no.
Yeah.
And people would come to her and be like, you've completely changed.
She
And
got
then
burnt out.
yeah, I guess.
And
Yeah.
that story of your friend is a primary example of how sun functions in Rohini Nakshatra.
Oh, so that's perfect, perfect
Yeah, that's a
segue.
perfect case, yeah, of how sun operates in Rohini. Because with the moon, you won't get the burnouts. You know how she loves doing it? You would think
Mhm.
at the beginning of the story, okay, she must have the moon there because
Yeah, that's what I
loves
thought.
doing it, right? But when you
Yeah.
put the sun there as a mild malefic, the sun will do it. It takes the initiative. Sun is a masculine planet, so it has that initiation, that authority, the leadership. For example, she's practicing these kinds of qualities, but it's burning her out by constantly taking that position to take care of other people and their needs. And then at some point, that malefic aspect of the sun, that mild malefic aspect of it comes out in terms of she again decisively decides, I'm done. Like she puts her
Yeah.
foot down in a very like a leading kind of a manner again, that I'm not doing it anymore, cut all connections, I'm done. With Mars, for example, as a malefic, the greatest malefic, Mars will not even take these steps to do what you just said about her story of that she loves doing it. So Mars will have that selfish orientation. Mars is that person who'll be like, I want to be loved. I want to get stuff. I want to get my needs met, but it has no intention and it wants to aggressively get it. And it will be aggressive about getting what it needs. And this makes every relationship very short-lived because the other person feels used and abused, or they could be in that position because they're meeting people like that, depending how it's falling in someone's chart. Because the father, I mean, the sun is still the father, so it has that tendency to do. But Mars, just about cutting, aggression, separating, and it takes away that enduring quality that's required in this nakshatra to grow and to cultivate and to bring to fruition so that you have something. So Mars just cuts everything off. So it becomes very difficult to do that. And Mars is hot. This is, I'm keep referring to water and moisture in this nakshatra for growth and cultivation. Mars just dries everything out. And the drying out aspect here is that Mars is just like give me, that's what I need. And the other person becomes dried out and drained. Saturn, right off the bat, nope, not doing it. Uh, you can't take too long with certain things. You have to, there's an art to relational dynamics of you can't delay sometimes. You know, you can't thank someone for something that they did. 6 months later, it loses its meaning. So Saturn's slowness, and Saturn is a dry planet also. The coldness and the darkness that's in Saturn, it doesn't allow that fertility and the growth to happen in Rohini also. It stalls it. But planets that do well are Moon, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury too. Mercury, especially with the intellect endeavors, and sometimes to be creative, you need a network to get what you need. So Mercury can also come to help with that too. So you're getting your resources and your needs met, and you're remaining a fertile field because of all the people that you know. And there's a fertile intellect. So the person could come up with ideas, how to do it, conceptualization of things. You know, Jupiter itself is about growing, is about cultivating. I mean, knowledge, teachers, this is what Jupiter is about. So Jupiter here adds to that cultivation and growing aspect of Rohini. So many children, you have the means and the energy and the resources, for example, to have many children, to create many things in a big way. So it comes to represent, and Venus is a planet of love, right? So that, and it's a very reciprocal, connecting, unifying planet. So if it wants love, you can rest assured Venus also wants to give love. So again, like the moon, it comes to create that circuit of give and take, which allows Rohini Nakshatra to just function very seamlessly. The two planets I like the most in Rohini are Moon and Venus.
Oh, because they obviously fare the best there.
Yeah,
It's give and take. And
yeah.
I'm guessing K2 is probably indifferent there.
Yeah, and then going back to, sorry, I'll go to K2 in a second, but going to Jupiter, this nakshatra has a passionate thing in it. It has it wants to create arousal and it wants to be aroused. And when we think about Jupiter and its function, this is why I don't, because a lot of people will say, why not Jupiter? Jupiter would do. Jupiter doesn't allow this part of the nakshatra to express itself fully. So that's one of the reasons why I would put Jupiter third. And then Mercury has an impersonal aspect to it. Again, that passion and arousal that's required in this nakshatra, Mercury doesn't full on support it either, like the way Moon and Venus would. So those are the reasons why I would put Moon and Venus and their feminine planets, where all of their symbols are in synergy with Rohini's symbols. So yeah, but K2. K2, K2.
High indifference, complete indifference.
Look, yeah, it could create indifference in a sense that K2 is about inward movements. Even coming back to the last statement that I was making about arousal and passion, K2 is anything but passionate. K2 is detached. K2 is introverted, is inward moving. And then just think about putting a seed in the ground. K2 is supporting it up to that point. But that point where that seed must now grow and start poking itself out of the ground to come up, upwards and outwards, K2 is not going to support that part of it. So there's something about creation that's bursting forth. That's what I was saying at the beginning when we take Brahma's quality into consideration. He's a Rajas guna. It's active, it's passionate, it's externalizing, it's activating. K2 is deactivating. So that activation that's required in this nakshatra to create, K2 is hindering that. K2's internalizing it, impersonalizing it, conserving it. There's something about growth that requires a process of conservation, and then it requires a process of utilization. So K2 doesn't allow half of the process to occur. And I was saying the guna qualities, the triplicity in this nakshatra is Rajas, Tamas, Rajas. So Rajas and Rajas at the end are two activated modes. The tamas part, which is inertia and activity, and it brings about decay and destruction, K2 supports that part. But then if you don't take the other two gunas into consideration here, then this nakshatra is dysfunctional. So K2 doesn't allow it to operate in a functional manner. And then Rahu will take
sucking the life out.
No, Rahu is taking the Rajas and Rajas part and over amplifying and over exaggerating it. And I was saying, for anything to be cultivated, to grow and to become something and to be something, to be created into something, it needs a moment of rest. You sow the seed, you water it, now you sit for a full season and wait before anything happens. Rahu will like dig into the ground and be like, why are you not growing? It doesn't allow this nakshatra to have the enduring quality that it has, and part of its endurance is to wait, to let things grow. And sometimes to let things grow means that we take our hands off of it and we just let the thing grow. So Rahu wants, because it amplifies the outward movement of it, the growth process of it, get bigger, more. Rahu comes to make this nakshatra somewhat dysfunctional again too, right? And then in a love relationship, because Rahu amplifies, over exaggerates, so this nakshatra needs the moisture, the water, which is speaking something about its need. Rahu will put a magnifying glass on that need, and that could actually make the person more self-oriented than Mars would here. It's like, give me more. I need more to do more, to feel more. So it just becomes about the more and the more and the more. And it just makes it dysfunctional in terms of what this nakshatra is trying to do. So it brings these kinds of hardship into it. And again, with any planet, with any nakshatra, planet in any nakshatra, in any sign, in any house, we human beings come into this world with certain set of ignorances. In some ways, we have certain wisdom that other people don't have. It's almost like something about our wiring privileges us toward knowing certain things, and then it takes away certain things. It would be good if we know it, and we just have to learn it through a learning process. So maybe someone who has a Rahu, Mars, or a Saturn or a K2 in this nakshatra, they've gone through a few relationships in life, and Sun as a mild malefic, and then they learn. They learn either their standard or the standard of conduct, that this is how relationship work, and that maybe there's something about me that's just how I'm doing things is not allowing it to be functional. The people that I'm looking for example, are not my creative process is dysfunctional because it never comes to its conclusion. For example, I abandon it or I become stagnant like Saturn in it. I take too long, so nothing comes to fruition. But with time and experience, we learn and we get better. So if someone's watching this and it's like, oh my God, I have a malefic in Rohini, life's not over. It just means you have some trials and tribulations ahead to figure certain things out if you pay attention and you work on it.
So it's basically like the saying, you live and learn.
Yeah. Don't we?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
some of us.
And then even those of us that we feel that they don't, maybe they don't about certain things, but they have about a lot of other things. Because like we didn't know how to walk, we didn't know how to talk, we didn't know what mannerism, consideration, and sharing, and we learn. We're all a little evil at the beginning, mine, no, selfish, and then we all become better, and then some things are harder for us than other things for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a happier next.
Yeah, it's a fertile, creative, Nakshatra, you know, I think the worst stories you hear about the deity of this nakshatra, he can have a temper sometimes, and he can have a sense of arrogance at sometimes. And this can also manifest in Rohini Nakshatra natives too. Like that story that you were given about your friends.
Hmm.
There's a kind of, if you think about it before she realizes what she's doing, I don't want to call it arrogance, but there's a kind of an overconfidence that you can just keep taking care of people. Because a lot of people would have clued in a lot sooner and be like, hey man, if I'm taking everyone's kids and I'm feeding them and I'm doing all the drive-ins and outs and all of this, they need to reciprocate. But for her to think that she was an infinite resource to be able to do it, a kind of a word for that is arrogance or too much like overconfidence, right? And Brahma has this quality too. In a lot of his narratives, these are like even in one of the stories where he creates Rudra out of his forehead is out of his anger. So he can lose his temper a lot. He does lose his temper a lot in a lot of the narratives. And
Yeah.
then he is sometimes under the impression that he can do many things where then it comes to be proven that, okay, maybe that was too much, you know? So, and this quality can come out in the natives also.
Yeah, because I think eventually, like you kind of said, I mean, yeah, they were so like they're totally into it. They love doing it, but then it's just
Mhm.
it feels to the outsider overnight they became just like I'm done. But
Yeah.
maybe it's been building up. Who knows?
Yeah.
But my suggestion to her at the time was I kind of felt like you're almost conditioning these people because when you give so much,
Yeah.
they get used to this giving. And then the expectation when they maybe forget, maybe not even intentionally, but
Hmm.
they forget that you're also human. You should also be cared for and,
Yes.
loved in the same way or appreciated in the same way. And when they don't, you
Yeah.
become upset about it. But it's almost like you've given so much for so long that when you all of a sudden change, they're like, oh, well, why are you so difficult?
Yeah. You know, I don't personally like the word conditioning because this is how I feel. For example, when you have a nakshatra, let's say where we're saying Moon and Venus will do really well, and let's say Sun, Mars, and Saturn struggle. The problem is when you have planets that are generally struggling, your external manifestation of events and situations also become malefic because she was, in a sense, meeting malefic people too, in some
Hmm.
way. Mild malefics, because they weren't trying to harm her, but they were taking advantage. But when you have a benefic bunch of parents in that event, they will insist that they will pitch in or they will replenish her in some way. But when you have malefic planets or you have malefic difficult situations, you'll see that the world is kind of taking advantage, fighting with you. It's also showing aggression. So when you have these difficult planets in Rohini, it's also saying something about the partner, something about the external events and environment and the people that you meet and the things that they will do. So it's like she is by nature a Rohini. So she's going to feel that I need to nurture, cultivate, grow, create. That's just part of her configuration. So in an ideal world, she's going to meet people who are going to receive that from her and they're going to welcome that because that's what she does. But in turn, even if she insists that, hey, I can do this, I love doing this because I like being at home and I just like I love doing this, they will still prepare some of the meal and show up with it anyway. They will
Yeah.
they will do certain things. They will not take advantage of it to a point where the Rohini native or any native comes to act in a malefic manner themselves. And then the irony of it is the external world also will again relabel them as malefic, for example. This is what it means to have a dysfunctional nakshatra. It's like you could act dysfunctionally, but you might be actually expressing the very configuration that that nakshatra is expressing but the events that you meet will create that situation, and then the event and the people of that event will come to label you as dysfunctional and malefic because of what you just did as, let's say, self-defense. But this is the kind of thing that happens when planets and signs, houses, nakshatras are not at their full power and at the seat of their power. These are the kind of struggles they come to have, even if they're acting like the planet and it's optimal. Something about the external world will be suboptimal because it's trying to bring that part out. And it's probably trying to bring that part out because I'm saying, like, we go through trials and tribulations because our souls need a lesson. We need to grow. We need to expand our horizon. And maybe if it was made too easy, maybe we wouldn't. Maybe it's retribution. I don't know, whatever your perspective is. These nakshatras that we're doing, just in terms of how planets go through them and how they feel, they're not going to be as thorough about the actual nature of the nakshatras. In the future, we can do hopefully some videos where we get into the deities and we get to the narratives, the astronomy of it, the astrology of it, all of it. But for these videos, we're just kind of like flowing through them.
Okay.
It's just trying to get a grasp for what happens when different planets are here. All right, so that was it for our Rohini video and planets through Rohini, and we'll be back soon to do Mrgashira, next one, and then Arja, and then Punarvasu, and so on and so on. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
All right, much love. Till next time.